Inspired by true events in West Africa, 1823. A narrator tells us about the new king who has taken over at the Dahomey kingdom, which is now known as the Benin Empire. They go on to tell us that their enemies, the Oyo Empire, has joined forces with the Mahi people to raid the people of Dahomey and sell the captives to the European traders. But now the new king has his own powerful weapon, which is an elite group of female warriors, the Agojie. Led by Nanisca. These warriors are the only factor saving the Dahomey kingdom from defeat. Let's dive in straight to the story. The movie begins with a group of Mahi warriors having a good time by the fireside. Suddenly they were attacked by the Agojie female warriors. This resulted to a bloody fight, as the warriors slaughtered all the Mahi warriors, liberating their slaves in the process. After they had freed the captives, they took their prisoners as they marched to the Dahomey kingdom. Back at Dahomey kingdom, they are respected and revered as the new king considers them to be his most valuable soldiers. The movie switches to a young maiden called Naoi. They had brought in a suitor for her, a rich old man, but Naoi doesn't want to be forced into marriage. When the man noticed that Naoi wasn't responding to his conversations, he slapped her, saying it was an act of disrespect. This made Naoi push the suitor away, so he leaves in disgust. Naoi's frustrated father then brings her to the Agojie, saying no one is ready to marry her and she should work for the king. Naoi is then taken to the palace, where she sees a lot of female warriors in training. Meanwhile, a group of Oyo warriors led by their general comes across the dead bodies of the Mahi soldiers. They are furious because they were slaughtered by women, so they plan their next attack, which is shutting off the new king of the Dahomey kingdom. Back at the palace, the new king tells his councils that the Oyo has entered their land and broken the peace and it's time to cut off from them. One of his council's member then tells him that the Oyo nation are twice their size with horses and more weapons. He continues by saying the Agojie wouldn't be enough to defeat them. Nanisca, the female warrior, then assures the king that they are ready. She chipped in that the Dahomey kingdom have prospered on slave trade, but it is slowly killing them and they needed a new approach. She suggests that they double their harvest and trade palm oils instead of their people. The king, who loved the idea of the palm oil, then requested to know more about the palm oil and its quantity. This left the other council's members disappointed. In the next scene, Nanisca addresses the freed prisoners and new recruits. She tells them all about the Dahomey kingdom and what they fight for. She tells them if they join the Agojie, they would be revered and their opinions would be heard. They are not to marry or bear children, as their major responsibility is to protect the Dahomey kingdom. She concludes by saying if anyone doesn't wish to stay, they are free to leave. Few girls decided to leave, but Naoi stayed back. After the orientation, Agojie introduced herself to Naoi as they striked up a conversation. She tells Naoi that the first training of being a warrior is to listen to her commands. She then tells Naoi to go take her bathe. While she was having her bath, she comes across Nanisca. They started a conversation as she introduced herself to the Agojie warrior. She also explained her situation to Nanisca. Nanisca then tells her that it only takes skills to be a great warrior and not magic. Naoi, on the other, is a strong-willed person, who believes she can achieve any feat. The next day during training, the girls were given ropes to begin with, but Naoi felt she needs a stronger weapon. Nanisca then gives her a blade to strike a wooden statue. She tried cutting the head but wasn't successful. Nanisca then takes the weapon from her as she cut its head with one swing. She then concludes by telling Naoi to focus on her rope. Later that night, Agojie goes over to meet Naoi. She tells her that she has to fight smart. She then narrates her tale to Naoi, and how her parents treated her badly. The next day, Agojie tells the group that they are to face their final test as warriors. Whoever passed will become Agojie, while those who failed will be left out from the group. They began their training as warriors, in which Naoi impressed as she acted smart. One time she added gunpowder to one of the wooden statues, which caused an explosion when an Agojie warrior struck it. Nanisca then summoned the girls. She demanded to know who performed the trick. Naoi took responsibility for her actions. She then challenged Nanisca, saying she did nothing wrong. Nanisca then admonishes her, saying she wasn't focused and her arrogance wouldn't take her anywhere. So she dismissed Naoi. Agojie meets up a sad Naoi. She takes her out for a conversation. She tells Naoi that she has to stop challenging Nanisca and her tongue will get her kicked out. She continues by saying Nanisca may one day be the woman king. King Gezo is a man that honors tradition. Unlike his brother, he treats everyone equal. In the next scene, after Nanisca had woken up from a bad dream, Amenza comes over to visit her, noticing that things weren't fine. She inquires to know about Nanisca's dream. Nanisca then tells her that she sees herself in the jungle with a beast, but doesn't know what exactly the beast looks like. Amenza then used nuts to interpret her dreams. She tells Nanisca that she sees someone from her past coming back to her and she should go to the altar. As Nanisca goes outside, she sees Naoi training so hard. The next day, while the people of Dahomey were having a feast, the Oyo warriors arrive with their general, Oba Ade. He confronts King Gezo saying they needed to pay the tribute to keep the Ueda port open for trade. King Gezo and the general came to an agreement of 20 Agojie warriors. Meanwhile, Nanisca was in shock as she recognized Oba Ade to be the man that raped her severally while she was in captivity. After he had left, Nanisca rushes over to the altar, where she meets up with Amenza. Nanisca tells her that her revelations were true as she recognizes Oba Ade, the Oyo general. The scene switches to the port of Ueda, the center of slave trades. White slavers from Portuguese led by Santo Ferreira arrived at the port. He was accompanied by his friend a half-Dahomeyan, Malik. Santo then showed Malik the slaves and how they were being treated, but Malik wasn't happy with what he saw. Just then the Agojie warriors arrived at the port. They meet up with Oba Ade. They confronts him saying they will no longer pay tribute to him as Nanisca gives him the head of his warriors and second in command. The Agojie warriors then flees, leaving Nanisca to the mercy of the Oyo warriors. They engage in a fierce battle. Luckily enough for her, she was saved by Naoi. After they had escaped the port, Nanisca scolds Naoi for staying back, saying her foolish decisions and arrogance will end her one day. Naoi was sad because she had just saved Nanisca from death. Amenza walks up to Nanisca. She tells her that Nanisca is actually the one that deviated from the plan. She should have run back with the Agojie warriors, but she decided to stay back and fight her enemy. In the next scene, Shantae, the king's favorite wife, walks up to Nanisca after she had returned from Ueda. She tells Nanisca that they should work together to serve the king and make their empire prosperous. But Nanisca knows her true intentions was just to sit on the throne next to the king. So she waved her off. Nanisca takes King Gezo to the oil plantation. He promises her that they will conquer the Oyo kingdom and then expand their land. He continues by saying he will never sell his own people to the white man and slave trading must stop when he conquers Oyo kingdom. At Ueda, Oba Ade assures Santo that they were still open for business and the Dahomeys can't stop them because the Mahi and Igbo kingdom is in alliance with Oyo. Meanwhile, Malik tells Santo that he needs to go visit Dahomey, as it was his mother's wish before she died. So the two traveled to Dahomey. During the journey, Naoi comes across Malik in the jungle, while he was taking a bath. At first she was hostile, but when she found out that he wasn't a slaver, the two became friends. Santo and Malik arrived at Dahomey. After greeting the king, he introduces Malik to King Gezo, who welcomed him wholeheartedly. He tells them to have a good time as the new Agojie recruits are displaying their final test today. Malik cites Naoi as one of the recruits. After the final test, Naoi came out to be the best warrior, as they all celebrated her victory. After the event, Nanisca helps Naoi remove the thorns that were stuck in her body as a result of the brutal test. While Nanisca was taking care of Naoi, she comes across a birth scar. Nanisca was taken aback as she leaves the scene. Amenza then go over to meet Nanisca, who is panicking in her room. It is then revealed that Nanisca had a baby back then when she was still a captive, and the scar on Naoi is very similar to the one she drew on her child back then. Meanwhile, Santo tries to convince King Gezo that if he stops the slave trade he will be nothing and unprotected. King Gezo tells him that they will no longer be a commodity to the white, and Dahomey kingdom are ready to fight for their freedom. Malik goes over to meet Naoi. He tells her to meet him outside the palm lines at night. Later at night, Agojie warns Naoi that she shouldn't give her powers to any man. She raised up the topic because she had noticed the way Malik looked at her. She advises her that love makes one weak, and she shouldn't fall a victim. Naoi goes over to meet Malik. He tells her that the Oyo are planning an attack on Dahomey, and they have invited other tribes to fight alongside them. Naoi then goes over to report this to Nanisca. Nanisca wasn't happy that Naoi was seeing a white man. She reprimands her, explaining how she was captured. She reveals to her that she was impregnated by the Oba and was left with a girl child. She made a scar and implanted a shark tooth in her left shoulder. Then she gave her away. Nanisca then cuts out the scar to confirm if the shark tooth was still there. She extracted the tooth, confirming that Naoi is her biological daughter. This revelation left Naoi in shock. In the next scene, Nanisca prepares her warriors to attack the Oyo warriors, who were already camped waiting to attack the Dahomey Empire. She tells the Agojie warriors that the Oyo warriors were much, which will make them arrogant and slow. Nanisca and her warriors then plant explosions all over the camp. She ignites the explosives as it took out majority of the Oyo warriors. This resulted to a bloody battle. When General Oba Ade noticed that he was losing the battle, he quickly tells his men to retreat. They captured the injured Agojie warriors, which includes Naoi and Agojie. The captured warriors were then taken captive and brought to the port for slave trade. As the Dahomey warriors celebrates their victory, Nanisca notices that Naoi wasn't among the survivors. At Ueda, Naoi meets up with Agojie, who was with a broken arm. She motivates Agojie not to give up hope and she should remain a warrior. One of the captured Agojie warriors escapes through the help of Naoi, and then goes over to Nanisca to report about the capture of Naoi and the others. In the next scene, King Gezo makes Nanisca the woman king, for her victory over the Oyo Empire. This made Shantae leave the palace in anger. Nanisca then begs him to allow her go for a rescue mission to save the captured girls, but he refuses to authorize it. Meanwhile, at Ueda, Naoi and the rest of the captured girls were brought out to be sold to the highest bidder. A distraction from Malik then enables the girl to escape, but Agojie is shot in the process. This made Naoi devastated. Malik then buys her from the slave trade to keep her from harm's way. Nanisca on the other hand disobeys the king's command. She goes over to rescue the captured girls with Amenza and some other warriors. The next morning Shantae informs the king of Nanisca's disobedience. This made King Gezo furious. Nanisca arrives at the port. She frees all the prisoners as they engage themselves in battle. In the midst of the chaos, Malik frees some prisoners as they gathered together to drown Santo. Naoi rejoins Nanisca in battle. She defeats Oba Ade in a bloody fight. As they returned back to Dahomey triumphantly, where the king had already prepared a feast to crown Shantae the new woman king. Upon seeing Nanisca return with the captives, he reprimands her for disobeying his orders. She tells him that she was ready to resign, but instead he proclaims her the woman king. This left Shantae heartbroken. The people of Dahomey then celebrates their victory and freedom. After the festival, Nanisca reunites with her long-lost daughter Naoi. The end. If you love this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye till we meet again.